Welcome back. Some important cyber anniversaries are happening this time of year. The National Cybersecurity Strategy just celebrated its 6-month anniversary, and the Federal Zero Trust Strategy will turn 2 years old this coming January. Steve Ryan is founder and CEO of Trinity Cyber. Steve, welcome. It's great to talk to you. What are some of the big cyber challenges that agencies are having?
I think the biggest challenge that the agencies have today is that the cybersecurity ecosystem is largely optimized to support incident response. And by that I mean responding to things that have already happened. So as a result, the security teams are flooded with alerts. You've got disparate systems all over the place. It's expensive to run, so there's a cost issue. But the primary thing is that they're buried in alerts. And then so many of these alerts contain false positives, right? So that, maybe 30% of them are false positives. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes an intractable problem, and a problem where typically, agencies are trying to scale to the problem, perhaps with more people. And the problem itself can't scale with people, mm-hmm. right? It requires a different approach.
Cyber ecosystem oriented to response as opposed to defense, or as opposed to some other situation, or?
Yeah, as opposed to preventing it from happening in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so many of these systems are reporting about an incident that has already happened. And so there's an entire body of effort aimed at looking at all those alerts, reducing them down to something that's manageable, and then responding to each of those incidents. Mm-hmm. And what they could be doing is turning around and focusing on the threats themselves and even the adversaries that are going after them.
The consensus seems to be, though, that perimeter defense is not the solution anymore. Nobody believes that. What fixes that? What makes the lives of those cyber pros easier than what you're describing?
I'd say the edge is not dead, and that's a really important thing. In between the bad guy and you, there's a network that connects you. I mean, that's the common denominator. Right, for a cyber threat to be a cyber threat, a bad guy has to get to you through a network. And so there are natural places where networks converge and then they distribute mm-hmm. Into the endpoints. And so if you think about being a defender and think about all the networks that are under your purview, and then all the endpoints, all the devices that are inside those networks, and then think about all the incidents that are occurring on each of those endpoints, you can't possibly scale to that problem. But if you turned around and you said, there's some number of bad guys, and each of those bad guys have some number of tools, it's a much smaller number, mm-hmm. right? And then find the use of those tools in the networks before they become incidents, right? And there's a point in the topology, and every network's a little different, but there's a point in the topology where that makes sense. And you might not call it a perimeter, you might call it an edge, you might call it something else, but it's something in the network that can be done.
I mentioned the National Cybersecurity Strategy. Is there a role for policymakers, people who write things like that in this, or is this a technical thing that the boots on the ground folks that are working on these networks on an ongoing basis will need to do, or is it some combination?
It's a bit of both. Yeah, it's a bit of both. The strategy is the National Cyber Strategy is really kind of heading in the right direction, right? We're kind of coalescing efforts towards making some of this stuff stop. CISA publishes the known exploited vulnerabilities list, known as the KEV list. And so the idea is, here are the vulnerabilities that are currently being exploited today. And so again, the natural way to think about this is, well, shoot, I've got to patch all my systems, and that's going to take forever. and a lot of money and a lot of time. And I'm not suggesting that you don't do that, but what I am suggesting is a bad guy exploiting one of those vulnerabilities is one thing. It could be going after 10,000 machines, but that's one thing. And looking for that one thing and doing something about it then and there, not responding to the incident, is really going to help.
Steve, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming on the program today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You can find links to the cyber documents I mentioned at the beginning of that conversation on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, solving the generative AI puzzle at the Pentagon. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.